What is a bondservant or a bondslave? I wonder if it's true, and that's what we'll do today. How are you? I hope that you are well. It's true, you are the one you've been waiting for, and my Facebook is going slow. But it's catching up now, and so I'm grateful. And I say to you, I hope you are too. So, I created this yesterday, and I thought it was a great workshop. And so I wanted to give you an opportunity to see it live, to be able to go through a workshop. January 7th, Friday, is where we're at, 10:13 a.m., where I am. And basically, this is about dropping the walls on our BS to connect in common unity. Community. We've got album 22.2, which is a phenomenal initiative for artists that are interested in up leveling the common vibration of humanity. And so we're creating another album. You can check out album 22 at album22.com. And that experience really contributed to the reshaping of my own self image. And now I'm doing another project, and now we're doing some other things too, which includes January 16th. We're going to do some peer support on the pier in Dover. So if you can make it out between 2 and 4, I'm hoping the weather's going to be beautiful. I'm hoping that the bubble bus is going to be able to come so that we've got bubbles. We've got a videographer that I'm personally hiring. I am maybe looking at crowdfunding as well so that I'm not footing the bill for all of this. But I feel like right now what we need more than anything is hope. And the best infusion of hope is to create a project. So, album 22.2 is one which has a mentoring component so that existing artists can actually offer some insights to aspiring artists and ones that would like to learn how to actually be an artist the way that basically we have an opportunity to see on album 22, and then also on album 22.2. This album is going to be pretty epic. So I am personally thrilled to have monthly meetings on the 22nd. This month is going to be at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so you can come out, meet some of the other contributing artists. You can get up leveled yourself with the mentoring component. We're going to have workshop shares. Eric Vasquez, aka Tony, actually did one about hertz and frequencies and changing your standard to a different frequency, and it changes your song using Audacity. So that workshop was available in November, I believe we did that. So we're going to have others, including songwriting. We're going to have a few others if you've got any special requests that you would like to have as part of the mentoring component that you would be willing to sit and learn and grow from and with, then definitely shoot me a comment. Leave me a comment. I love comments. I do read them all. I appreciate you. And if your comment is not kind, that is a reflection on you too. So I send you love, because if you're wanting to be unkind in your comments or your messages, then I believe that you need it a lot, because there's no reason to be unkind to someone that is being themselves authentically unless you are not, which is where the bondservant and bondslave aspect come in. Awesome to have you here today, Mercury, and I have something pretty special for you today. So right here in the top corner, you can't see it well, but basically we've got a hierarchy, which is a combination of the hierarchy of creation, the hierarchy of motivational needs, and then you've got Tony Robbins's hierarchy version, which is 6 instead of 5 tiers. But basically, in the hierarchy of creation, at the top you've got God, source. That's the creator. Whatever the creator is, that that made it all happen at the very top made us, you, me, and everyone else. And so man and woman are underneath of God, or the grand overall designer, creator, source, as the individuated expressions of that, in order to experience ourselves as the water in a glass that came from the ocean. Is it still ocean water? Is the question, right? And so basically, man or woman was created from God source. And then under man or woman, you got government that was created to serve us. And then you got legislation, which is how the government operate based on policies and procedures, which they need because it's all got to be in the box. It's like if you showed up to play a game of Monopoly and you didn't know what to do when a certain thing happened. And so you looked at the manual and it wasn't in the manual. It's like if it's not in the manual, which is the equivalent of legislation, then they have nothing to reference. So then they have to create a rule for that, because if they don't have a rule, then they don't have something to adhere to. And then they don't know whether they're on track or off track, because a corpse is dead and lifeless until we give it our life. Corporation, corpse. We always call it that, but without the E, we don't think of it as being a dead body, right? Well, when you think of a corpse as the corporation, and also as the dead body that is soulless until you give it yours and then get a paycheck as the value exchange for your investment of energies. Well, that then is when you see that the corporate entity is actually feeding off of you, and you are the prisoner. You are the bond servant or slave. That is not entirely true. You're just more so the slave when it is for a government that is basically de facto and upholding their own rules for the benefit of the corporation, for which all of it works for, which is the Vatican, essentially, the crown or the bar, which is what all lawyers are sworn to first and foremost. Ultimately, any man or woman acting as a judge or a lawyer, a persecutor, prosecutor, basically the judge and all of the legal ones are sworn first and foremost to the bar or the crown, which means they can only ever take a person so far. And I did say person on purpose, because a person is like the interface that the government uses in order to apply the rules of the government to the man or woman who is at a higher standing than the status of person would have them be, which then allows them, us, to fall under the jurisdiction, juris being law or rules, and diction being what is spoken. So if you fall under their jurisdiction, which you do when even you agree to say you understand something, that does not mean you comprehend it. It means you stand under in the court of law, because they use legalese, which is kind of like English, but it's got its own different definitions and meanings, which is why when you go to the court of law, that is really when you need to have your own terms and definitions. You need to have a chart to give definitions and distinctions, so that when you make mention of something or reference to something, you're not automatically being assumed to be saying one thing when you're actually saying something else. You have to run out the door, Mercury. Well, it's awesome that you showed up, and I appreciate you for doing so while you were able to. Um, Under government legislation, you then have the corporate entities or the public servants that we think are public servants, but actually they're corporate dogs. They work for the corporation. The elite's dogs are said to be the military and the ones that wear the dog tags. And don't get me wrong, like dog tags are pretty sexy. I think. I always thought growing up, I used to see like soldiers with dog tags, and it's like, yum yum. But then you hear that the dog tags are because they're the pets of the elites, and then it's just like, yes. And then you realize that we either play this chess game of life as the pawn, bishop, king, queen, castle, or knight. So our positions, we get to choose what we're going to do. And basically, the intention for today is to actually just break down something that I had written before I did something else. And then I asked the question that then led to another question and then became the topic of the day, which is, what is a bond servant? Because up here, underneath of the hierarchy of creation, where cops, courts, councils uphold legislation of the government, and then corporations are the private sector of the public domain. And the corporations are the corpses that we give our energy to, sign on behalf of, meaning we become half of the corpse, which mean then when liabilities are applied to the corpse, it has to fall to the man or woman that is acting on behalf of it. Therefore, we assume the personal liabilities of that which we signed on behalf of, should any damage come to any man or woman or child who used said recommendation or advice. I intend to add no advice. I am no one's guru. I am simply a woman who has come to learn what I believe to be the most empowering information that I have ever discovered. And for that reason, I really like to share what I have come to believe with others who might benefit from hearing it too. And so that is the hierarchy of creation. In the motivational hierarchy of needs, or the hierarchy of motivational needs, within it, we're going to go in deeper later, but respect must be foundational to all of what we're going to be framing this as, because it's very easy to get very upset when you find out how much we've been deceived, because it's a betrayal. And ultimately, I was having a conversation this morning that was saying we really need to make it about breathing ourselves back into the moment and realizing that we need to use the existing systems, but we need to change how the existing systems work in order to bring about something that we've never had before. And we're going to have a period of unrest or turbulence as we go through the trials and tribulations that ultimately take us through the valley of transformation, the dark night of the ego, and then the dark night of the soul, and then the phoenix process that leads to integration, embodiment, and contribution, which is ultimately the latter half of the sacred sojourn of the soul that then brings you back home where you started, knowing it for the first time, because you have new eyes to see things for what it truly is rather than what you always thought that it was before you found out different and then came back, just like Plato in the cave. When the man leaves the cave that everybody's so afraid of because they see the shadows on the walls dancing at night. And then the one leaves the cave and he goes out and then he comes running back in and he says, "It's amazing out there. There's so much color. There's green, beautiful leaves, and we don't have to live quiet and small and cold. It's the sun hits your skin and it thaws and it changes the color of it even, and it's just such an amazing experience, and you've got to come out." And then everybody that stayed in the cave that was too afraid to leave the cave basically says to the one that left the cave, either get out there and stay there where you clearly like it better, or you just forget that you ever went out there and you get back here in the dark with us and you forget that you ever went there. You can think it was a dream, but you're going to be right here with us. Plato's cave, Laura's version. So that is my little explanation of cognitive dissonance, and the ones who stayed in the cave being the ones that are wanting to protect the existing BS belief systems within the kingdom of you. And that's where then we invite you to the Queen's Park assembly of kings and queens, men and women acting as kings and queens who are willing to learn the difference between a status and a standing, and to actually make claims as men and women against men and women acting in positions that are using public power in order to achieve personal ends, and in the process of selling out the people, personally gain from doing so. That's a crime. And right now, we have a whole culture, which is the culture you are, that accepts that. And what we need to do is realize that we are bond servants or we are slaves. So, what is a bond servant? Why do I even bring it up in the first place? Because I can't remember where I wrote this from, but this crossed my path and it felt significant. So I wrote it down. And then yesterday I had the epiphany to ask, what is a bond servant? Which is a person bound in service without wages. It's a professional volunteer or missionary, essentially, a slave or a serf. And I have a definition of terrorism right here with a order or questions and notice for anybody that is wanting to still attend a building with religious meaning to you without uh, without fearing any fines and whatnot. There's a notice I have here as a sample that could be used in order to put the men and women acting in these public positions on notice in their private capacity, so that they know that if their name is on the order, that they are going to be held personally liable because you'll have claimed your rights to be able to do what you're doing, because in our private capacity with all rights reserved at all times, and also knowledge that we are not the surety for our person, which is different from who we are, which is the distinction that we really need to get into our own minds. Once we actually understand how to make claims and how to know who we are, and then what we have, which is a person, compared to what we are, which is a man or a woman, right? And there's the definition of terrorism that goes with that notice of protection, because essentially you're putting the men and women acting as officers and any other public position that are coming to cause harm on notice privately, that they will be held liable in their private capacity. And that, I believe, is how everyone will start to smarten up, because then we'll start to see the personal accountability that is ultimately what is missing right now in a culture that absconds personal responsibility in many ways. So I don't know what the comment is, but I don't like how some post links to things that could be devious without saying anything and trying to remain anonymous. It just feels a little underwhelming. So, bondservants. Bondservants of Christ are only to use God's law, is what this says, and I don't remember the source. Secondly, the common law is a commercial law today, created by merchants, influenced by Roman law, and used for commercial purposes. All of man's laws, except for many maxims of law, are commercial in nature. The true method of making the application is to ascertain how the maxim arose and to consider whether the case to which it is applied is of the same character, or whether it is an exception to an apparently general rule. We are apprenticing gods. We wanted to be able to play with our creations. Isn't that amazing? How cool, right? So go back. What is a bondservant? It is a slave, a person bound in service without wages. It's also a volunteer, a missionary. Altruism is a virtue. It's not a virtue, it's an act based on values, because our community really needs to become at the forefront of what we're focused on. Building community matters now more than ever. And all of the disconnect and the transactional nature of relationships nowadays, it really could do with some changing. Like, let's just kind of unite ourselves as I decide to do a braid and then I see the symbolic connection, but I just kind of go with what comes up for me oftentimes in the moment, and then I kind of piece it together as to why after. And I wonder if you do that same thing too. Bond servants. Are you a bond servant? Well, is it a bad thing to be a bond servant? Now, we have to look at what it means to be a servant leader. Now, when I was in the John Maxwell team, that was very much a topic of conversation about being a servant leader. And I've always been that way in some ways. I'm not perfect by any means. Like, I've definitely got my flaws, and I've got lots of people that would be glad to point those out for you as well if you wanted. But ultimately, we have to really just come to a place of loving self-acceptance for ourselves. And I posted yesterday an interview I did with Rita Davies, and it was last February that that interview took place, and I shared a lot of my own story before that, which is part of the reason it was so short, and then my computer got full, and so it cut off recording. And so I didn't share it all of this time, but I knew there was gold in there because she said a lot of really great things. And so I posted that yesterday, and somebody had commented about false prophets and false idols, and Jesus warning about people like us. And the in fairness, the chapter reading I did yesterday was on ascension, and Rita did talk about ascension, which was nearly a year ago, but I got it up posted for the first time yesterday, so it's new for anyone else, right? So I can hear where they're coming from, and also say that I think Rita's awesome, and I'm just so grateful that when I was in England, I got to meet her, and she did energy sessions with me and channeled higher consciousness when she did it, and it was just absolutely magical, and I'm so grateful for Rita. So I got that posted yesterday, and then the comment, about being the false idol, it's just like, I'm kind of to a place where I'm seeing that the man known as Jesus was named otherwise while he was alive. And then he also was against religion and politics, essentially. And then he died on the cross, was said to have sacrificed himself for the sins of all who came after him, and then rose from the cave after 3 days, which ascension is a scientific process, apparently, but we also need to really honor the physical vessel while we're here, which is why we need to start getting movement more into our daily experience. I say to you because I say it to myself. And so I'm going to be working that into the special practice, which on Monday night, January 10th, at 8 p.m., I'm going to be doing a presentation. It's not just me, it's the kingdom within you, or the kingdom is within, is what it's called. But that one's going to be on the special practice. So we're actually going to start working on building a special practice for ourselves on Monday, January 10th. So I hope that you will be able to participate in that creative process of really designing a self-care practice that will support you and help you up level yourself to be able to do more of what you came here for. So that is super exciting. And right here, the wheel of life It's an evolutionary process. So, this actually, you see, there's 8 different sections of the pie. And so you're to go around the circle, and for friends and family relationships, significant other and kids, career and vocation, money, home environment, faith and personal growth plan, fun and recreation, and your health. Each of those 8 areas, if you divide a pie chart into 8 sections and then give yourself a rating in each of those sections between 0 to 10, 0 being towards the center, 10 being towards the outside, meaning you're more fulfilled compared to unfulfilled. And you then go around the circle and fill all of the pie holes in. And then you see how balanced your wheel would be if you were to drive on that. Like if you were to try to use that wheel to ride through life in, how balanced would that experience be? Like, are you doing well balance wise, or do you have some room for improvement, which is where then the Jahari window comes in? And this is the window about continue doing what you're doing, change what you're doing, start doing something new, and stop doing something that no longer serves you. So when you actually use your wheel of life in order to see your level of balance and satisfaction, you can reflect on the high rise of emotional awareness. This isn't this. The high rise of emotional awareness is another teaching that we're going to get into more on Monday night, which is a huge piece to the theory that I am really bringing forward with soul fragment recall. But I meant to say the hierarchy of motivational needs, and you've got self actualization at the top, respect under that. You've got belonging as the center point or the tipping point, then safety under that, and survival. And what you'll notice is that culturally, the culture you rally with, the culturally accepted BS that has been going around for nearly 2 years now is to protect your fears, to protect playing small, to focus on the lower level needs compared to higher level needs, which belonging is the tipping point. It's the fringe between survival and safety focus, or between respect and self actualization focus. Belonging is that tipping point. And so you really have to look at your own willingness to respect yourself in order to do what is required. Because if you're looking for someone else to give you permission or to help you stand when things get tough, they're not going to be there because they've got their own battles. We all have our own battles in this life. So we really need to get clear on what's serving us, what's hindering us, and then what we're going to do about it. So the Wheel of Life is a really great exercise, especially when you really factor in your motivational needs and where you're kind of sitting in the hierarchy within the chart in each area of your life. And then with the Jahari window there we are, with the Jahari window here as to continue, start, stop, or change. That experience is really significant for how we're going to create the life that we desire for ourselves moving forward in the present now moment. And so the current infringements on our rights is overreaching, and everyone wearing a suit to give orders is liable personally. When I say suits, what I mean is any status which is a public interface, just like my account in Zoom is, or on YouTube or Facebook where it's streaming. I have accounts with all of those different software or with the different companies, right? So I have interfaces with them. Well, my person is an interface with the government. A lawyer is a suit. That is the title. And a man or woman puts that on. And then the man or woman is what ultimately takes it off and goes off to be a man or woman when they're not acting as the position, wearing the suit. So what I'm saying is that the men and women acting as the public person, or suit status, they're liable in their private capacity. And this is what I believe will be part of this tipping point that we need to really reach. It is time to see and talk about how our choices will be paid for sooner or later in flesh and spirit too. So we have to think about this notion of karma. We have to start talking about the fact that if karma is real and we do live in a universe of cause and effect, of choice and consequence, that every choice we make will be paid for with a consequence. And so when we think about it from that perspective, that's when we see karma as the answer to the question, what side of history will you be on? Are you going to be in the dark night of the ego, where you are in the innermost cave and you're facing yourself, but what you're actually facing is your suit, your reputation, your public image? What I'll tell you is that in September, October 2019, when I got locked up in the mental health system under the Mental Health Act, which is an act I don't subscribe to, and I don't recommend you do either. And that recommendation goes in line with the assignment of OPCA litigant, organized pseudo legal commercial argument litigant applications for anyone using an self advocacy argument is then deemed to be questionable in their sanity, because the modern day witch hunt is the Mental Health Act, from my perspective, having been through it. And so I just caution anyone that is involved with any kind of movement, regardless of whatever your medical status is, that's private medical information that I do not recommend you share, whether you've received your jab or whether you have not. I would say do not share it. It is no one's business other than your own. And if it is their business, then you need to understand how you are benefiting them by being in that business. How is your personal private business their business? And if it is their business, how are they profiting from you? And what is the benefit to them for you doing what they're recommending you to do? These are questions. These are things that we need to be looking at. But I just simply say, do not share. I will not tell you what to do, because I am no guru. I am simply looking to fine tune my relationship with the guru within me. And so I say, I do not share private medical information or statuses publicly. Also, I reserve the right to not have any status applied to me without my consent. Furthermore, I do not accept the con that has been sent so far, and I do suggest that we change the play, because this act is done. So that is part of the message when body, mind, heart, spirit, and will are all aspects of our nature we need to balance. Respect must be at the foundation of our relationships, or we will make fear-motivated choices. If we're not focused on higher level needs, which is respect and self-actualization, after having achieved belonging with people that appreciate us for being our authentic selves, regardless of whether that stretches and makes them have to stretch to keep up with you. Beautiful bonding there, Laura. Thanks. Amazing, Stephen. So respect must be at the foundation of relationships, because if fear is at the foundation of the choice or the decision, then we're going to not even be at the level of belonging. We get our belonging then from being part of the fear cult or the death cult that is progressively moving towards sickness and decay and destruction. What? No, I think not. This whole fear cult and all of the fear propaganda that's constantly being sold on the airwaves. There are movements, and Monday on the 10th as well, there's actually a rally at Nathan Phillips Square in the morning. And that is an opportunity to take back the mainstream narrative. And I'm editing a video. I just literally got it uploaded I haven't got it uploaded to public yet, but I got the file saved of Neil Sperling, my friend, and he is sharing his 4-part video series, but I have condensed it down to 52 minutes. So I'm pretty excited. And I even put in Katy Perry's song Roar in there too, because it's really kind of perfect for where what Neil's talking about and the video. So I put those side by side and I did some cool editing, and I'm just so impressed with how I can edit now using iMovie is what I've learned, and it's a really cool and fun technique that I'm grateful for. You know what I mean? So that is a sidetrack which goes to the mentoring with album 22.2. So anybody that's interested in like videography or arts, I've got some teachings that I really could use a designer to help me be able to create. Ironic since that song is very demonic in nature. Yeah, it is very true, Stephen, that Roar by Katy Perry, and from my understanding with the Illuminati and belonging and all of that, I do see the irony. I do see the irony of the inclusion of her song on Neil's video series about ending human trafficking. But what I think is really important is for us all to understand we're being trafficked. Until we claim the right to stand as a woman or a man in our private capacity with all rights reserved at all times, and also not consenting to being a surety for your person, which you understand is separate and distinct from you, the man or woman, because we have a person, which is the trust, that we then put our trust into the government to manage because they're supposed to be the trustees. They just happen to also make themselves the beneficiaries and then apply surety status to us, status being key, because then we have to be liable for the choices that the man or woman makes. And so it's a very big responsibility to be a surety for someone. And the crazy thing is that we're assumed to be sureties for our own person, which is how we get into so much trouble when we let people remain men or women in suits. Because when we're in our suits, we are wearing something that can be taken off, and then the man or woman gets away scot-free, so to speak. And I don't know where that term comes from, but I suspect it comes from somewhere significant, or there's a significant parallel there. But basically, we have to take the suits off of men and women, because the conversation I was having this morning was that it was men and women that created the legislation previously, and it is men and women that are consenting to uphold that legislation still. And that is partly true. But the Santa Claus is actually very relevant here. And I read the chapter from the book I've been reading every day, Joyriding the Universe, which we will read the side effects of the genetic shift, actually, once we get through the acronym for respect. Then we're going to read the side effects of the genetic shift, which is not very many pages, so it won't take too long to get through, and then we'll have that done today too, which is super exciting. So hugely productive new year we are having. I lost the train of thought that I was on before I said that we were going to read that. The Santa Claus Gestalt is a chapter within that. And a Gestalt is like a multi-layered paradigm. And a paradigm is a belief system. So multi-layered beliefs beliefs all connected, one on top of the other, it's like an onion effect. So you've got so many layers over top of who you are. Well, that's what our statuses have become. So the statuses go over the man or woman that stands with our legs and feet, or if we're so blessed. And so these are the things that we need to start seeing the distinctions between. I am a woman with a person. And that is not to say that I think that I'm multiple individuals. It's like I am a woman with a person. A person, by definition, can also include a trust or a corporation. There is a trust that was created with the birth certificate that I was registered by my parents with. And ultimately, Eli was going to jump on here this morning. And I think he was gonna talk about the birth certificates, actually. Let me just see if I could, let me go and find him. Eli. Hey, you still able to join? He's gonna talk about birth certificates, or that was what he was going to talk about. So, do you know Scot in Gaelic means to love, scot-free, to be free to love? Of course. Thank you for defining that, Stephen. What? Wow. Scot means to love? I love that. Scot-free. Got off scot-free. Free to love. Ah, yes, I knew there was something to that, but I hadn't figured it out yet. That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. Cool. So I've messaged Eli, and he may be able to come in about the birth certificates, which the birth certificates is where the trust was registered for us. The Sequivi Act of 1666 was where the Vatican really took over, and then everything got under the name of the crown, which we thought was the woman with the gown, but actually it was just the Vatican, and then everything else that has fallen under their reign when the corporations started taking over in this attempted corporatocratic takeover. But I say attempted because it's not going to actually go the way that they would have it be, except for then we need to see that they are us, because we are all on this ship together. And that is why we need to take the suits off of the men and women that are wearing them, that feel bound to their position and all that comes with the oaths and vows and whatever they've sworn in order to get the position in the first place and be able to don the suit. We have to recognize that the government are men and women just like us that are acting in those positions, that are being put into situations they don't want to be put into, but they feel bound to their position because of what it took to get there and what it'll take to maintain their belonging there. And the reality is that when we're at that level of I have to, we're in obligation, which is dysfunctional, and that is lower level needs in terms of belonging, safety, and survival, lower level needs. But respect is an acronym that I actually picked up from this book, The Art of Talking So That People Will Listen, which I was going to give away, and it just happened to be on top. And so I flipped it open and I found the acronym for respect, and I thought it was brilliant. So I wanted to share that with you today too. Remember your childhood. Clarissa Pinkat Smith actually has a phenomenal exercise that I want to kind of go through with you, which is actually about putting a cross at all the places along your path where you left aspects of yourself in a not now moment because you judged yourself or gave up on yourself, denied, rejected, tried to pretend something didn't exist, all of that. We want to go back and we want to mine the experience of the emotion so that then we can get the lesson without having the emotion be stuck there. And that's how we de-escalate our triggered states. We actually let them flow through the energetic system of us. Now, E, encourage your self-esteem by creating something better for yourself. If we sing from the heart over the Bones, we bring things to life as we lullaby our soul back to life. And that actually also came from Clarissa Pinkett Smith and her audio program, Women Who Run with Wolves. Well worth listening to. I've got the audio program that I bought, and I've listened to it in my car for quite some time over the years. So, highly recommend that resource if you're not familiar with it. It's really about reclaiming the wild within us. S is about strategize to stop hassles before they start. It's an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Consider experiences with compassion. We have to really look at situations and people in situations and see how oftentimes we do the best that we can until we know better. We can't do better. Once we do know better, we can do better. And so we must. E is elicit your child's world. Elicit your child's world. Imagination. I, Madge, at Magi, nation. We are creating our own nations with the image that we are bringing into fruition. So be willing to actually tune into the child within you and their sense of imagination, their creativity. That creative inspiration can be contagious. And sometimes the contagion effect is actually a really positive thing. John Maxwell used to tell me, he'd pinch my cheeks and say, Laura, your personality is just contagious. And it's just like, yeah, baby, because we need that right now. And so I hope that that's what this is giving to you now. That contagion effect of saying, yes, I can. I don't know what specifically I may be here for, but I know that I came here to figure it out and I'm going to do it. And I can do this. And giving yourself that vote of confidence. Yes. Communicate love. Learn your love languages. There's 5 love languages. Like, are you somebody that needs gifts, words of praise and affirmation, quality time together or time apart? Are you someone that wants to receive gifts, or are you someone that needs physical touch? I think those are the 5. I may have repeated one and then missed one, but so far as my fingers count, those are 5 love languages that if you understand your love language and if you understand your partner's love language, then you can actually give your partner love the way that they want to be loved rather than giving love the way that you want to receive love. And if you can learn each other's love languages, well, that is just a magical experience of feeling heard and feeling connected and like you belong to somebody that cares enough about you to know what you want, what you like, and how you like it. And then to give you that, wow, that is a really beautiful experience to be able to have with another man or woman that wants to make you feel special, because that's what it's all about, really. Like, we don't need to be our person's not a person. We don't need to be our partner's everything, you know? That's very dysfunctional and it's very culturally encouraged because dysfunction is literally culturally encouraged at this point. It's just like if it's culturally acceptable and encouraged and promoted, then it's probably not necessarily the very best thing for our soul, because there's a spiritual war at play right now and our souls are on the line. And so is our minds. And so are our hearts and ultimately our spirit or our soul. So there's different aspects. Spirit and soul are actually different. Soul is unique to the individual compared to spirit is what fills the souls and all life and makes it all go. So all 5 loves, please. But I don't need the gifts. Well, gifts, then that can also be a reflection of an issue with receiving as well, right? So just being mindful that if you have an aversion to receiving gifts or demonstrations of praise or receiving love in certain ways, that there might be trauma or a wound there where you've got a little man or woman inside of you, a little child that's basically got hurt and got locked up in the inner kingdom of you back all those years ago, that is basically acting out because they don't want anything to do with that hurt them once or maybe many times. But just being aware of the reason that we say, yeah, I don't do that, that's fine. Just leave those. I'll take the gifts. I love it. Yes, good. All right, in receiving mode. Transfer significant values. Bondservants into men and women to connect with our authentic power was what I wrote there. So transfer significant values. We've got to know who we are. We have to remember the value that we have. We have to remember that we're worth it. We have to remember that we are the ones that get to choose how we're going to be remembered based on what we're willing to do while we're here. We don't necessarily get to choose who's going to remember us. We don't get to choose what they're going to say specifically, though, there's an exercise where you can actually write the heading for your gravestone. But then that's also further programming into the death cult, which is to say that we have to die and decay and, age and shrivel and all of these notions, which are gestalts, which is the layered onion effect, which is where we went way down a rabbit hole compared to saying that if we just cut through all the BS, all the suits, we get back to the men and women at the root. And when we do that, that is then when we can get back to the values that we stand on commonly, on common ground, which is where the common law stands. And if we can actually make claims and then stand on our claims and then enforce those claims, which a lot of people are having issues with, which is why it doesn't feel like it's possible just yet. But we just didn't have the right men and women knowing who they were to claim their rights and stand as men and women, calling other men and women to do the same in their private capacity. And when we put all of us in our private capacity who may sometimes work in a public position, it's a very different proposition. And that's how I believe we take our power back. Let's start respecting ourselves and our future more. Setting higher standards is required. We got to raise the lid. The law of the lid in John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, for instance, the law of the lid is our self-image. It's like on a scale of 0 to 10, if you see yourself to be an 8, which is pretty high in fairness, but if you see yourself to be an 8, that is the lid on your self-image. That is the lid on your level of leadership. Your ability to lead others will depend on your ability to believe yourself to be worthy of getting there yourself. So an 8 out of 10 means you don't have 9 and 10 accessible to you. But if your self-image is way lower, which the majority are, it's like we don't even have access to like up to an 8, which means we really need to raise the bar on our own self-image and self-perception. Focus on filling the well of your own energy center. This is about deposits versus withdrawals. So we have to really be clear about how we're pouring into ourselves, how we're adding value to ourselves. Where are we spending our energy and where are we investing it? Investments have a return, whereas when we spend something, it's gone and that's it. So really being mindful, is this an expense? Or am I making an investment here? So that's a really good question, especially when it comes to the people that you're hanging out with. Are they uplifters or are they life drainers? Do you leave them feeling better or do you leave them feeling worse? If they're family, you can spend less time with them. If they're friends, you may wish to disconnect with them. But who wants to really leave behind all of the years worth of stories, right? So how can we not disconnect, but how can we maintain our own value, our own self-esteem, our sense of worthiness? How can we maintain that where we are and allow another man or woman or child to be themselves authentically without expecting them or needing them to be other than they are in order to make us to feel safe to be ourselves in whatever capacity that is for the individual that is desiring to be more of themselves. Because if they desire to be more of themselves, chances are they know that there is something over top of who they truly are, which is a status, a personage, or something that is other than true. Now, let's respect the plan. Patience, perseverance, peacefulness, and pedophilia. Of course, I would cough and clear my throat at that moment. The pedophilia, actually, the patience, peacefulness, and perseverance, or pedophilia, it actually comes from Neil Sperling, his video series that I will be getting uploaded probably today. And in that series, Neil actually has an idea for how we take back the radio waves and also the print media, which is very timely given on Monday the 10th in Toronto at Nathan Phillips Square. There's going to be a gathering where men and women come out to advocate for some rights and to make some things happen. And so it's all in divine timing, and lots is happening here in Canada. So there is a tremendous amount of hope. We just have to maintain it for ourselves, for sure. And we have to create our own Garden of Eden. So we must become the guards in the energy den of us. And it's about transforming our self-image with forgiveness for loss of an idea or an image to be allowed to be grieved. We have to be okay with actually creating a space to grieve the loss of what we had before COD video game drama took it away. Like, life is not going back to what it was before 2020. It doesn't exist anymore, I'm sorry to say. So I think this is a good place to say compassionate living, conscious community, and musical mentoring are aspects of what I believe part of the shift needs to be, as well as understanding our rights as men and women from a lawful perspective too. So definitely I'll be sharing more of that with you. And what if the ascension was about rising above the lies, was the question that I thought was a good one to end the workshop with. And thank you. Thank the universe for change. Yes, absolutely. See it done as you would like it to be. And then you can put your energy toward that and actually bring it into existence. So that's what we have to do together. That's what we are doing together. That's what we will do together. So we are on the right track. And I am going to use this opportunity to actually read the next chapter for today. So it's been an hour. And I say thank you very much for showing up today and for contributing along in the comments. I do very much appreciate it. And I look forward. Hey, Jamie's an artist. That's awesome. Yes, the fear mongering is part of the Nazi narrative of psychological warfare. Yes, it is true, Jamie. Yes. So, all right, here we go. 11:10. At 11:11. How amazing. New beginnings, clearing of throats, the side effects of the genetic shift. Your body is going through a genetic reconstruction. In the process of doing it, many things are going to happen and change in it. The heart center in your being is an electromagnetic sac. In the heart center, you have two pacemakers. You have a natural pacemaker, which is on the front, and you have a second one that is being created on the back. The second one on the back is going to be for the newly evolved species and body. Some of your hearts are fluttering, palpitating, flip-flopping in your chest. And when you go to the doctor, he says there is nothing wrong with you. But here, have some pills. What is happening is the bodies are biologically reconstructing. What is happening is the bodies are biologically restructuring. Biologically reconstructing this new pacemaker on the back of the heart. The back one is beating at a higher vibration. Your heart gets two signals, and the chest is kind of trying to figure out where the arrhythmia is. It kind of flutters, palpitates, and can't figure out what is wrong with itself. Because the number one killer is heart disease on this planet, you tend to go into fear if this is happening to you. I would say if you have problems, go to the doctor anyway because it will alleviate your fears, and fear is your worst enemy. Most of you think that since you're trying to evolve, that if there is something physically wrong with you, you failed. Always, if you have physical difficulties going through your process, it is not a failure. If you're upset and mad at the body, you're going to aggravate your problems with it. Since it is going through a genetic reconstruction during this time period, your body is not always going to be 100% up to par to your ideal of how it is supposed to be. Be gentle with it. The heart is one area of change. Livers have a tendency to act up during these time periods also. Be gentle with them too. You might have a tendency to go through fatigue, and your mind will go through this real spacey time period where it won't focus on anything. It's just like you're out in space going crazy or senile because the thought is there and you lost it. You'll go through it, and it doesn't matter what your age is. It has nothing to do with senility. Most of you consider that all your memory is held in your head. If all the memory that you're using is held in the head or brain, you are stuck in the rut of primitive or first brain. Your mind is your electromagnetic field, your auric bands, or whatever you wish to call them. Your field is your mind. The thing in your head is your brain. The brain only holds temporary memory called behavior, instinct, and survival. That is all it holds. The mind is where your thoughts and your concepts come from, and it is surrounding your embodiment. You are learning to access more parts of your mind, your fields, but since you've been in a rut, you are used to your brain picking up things easily. You're expanding your mind now, so instead of the data you want being here in the head, it's further out in your field. The brain goes out to pick up a thought in the field, tries to bring it back, but it doesn't remember the path, so it drops it. In mid-sentence, the thought disappears when it was right there. It got glitched. It disappeared. You will all go through it, and it doesn't matter what your age is. If you're older, then you say, well, I'm going senile. But people will go through it even in their 20s. It has nothing to do with senility. But the brain is learning how to access further and further reaches of your own mind. Sometimes it just doesn't do it perfectly yet. That is all. In order to go through a genetic shift, you have to dump the old memories of the body and out of the DNA structure. The old memory is emotion. Anything that was ever emotionally embraced by any of your predecessors you're dealing with right now in your body, unless you've cleared it. If you look back on your lives, most of your experiences, which were real powerful and intense experiences in which you had an emotional embracement, were traumatic. Most of them were painful, real miserable, and very emotional. There is some love coming in there now, though. Look at your pattern and realize that your ancestors were probably into more drama and trauma than you are. When you're going through your genetic reconstruction, you're going to have to dump that cellular memory and put in what you want, so that this body you're living in matches your mind the way you want it to. Right now, your bodies are being run by everybody else. They are being run by your ancestors, your neighbors, the dog on the street, the who, and the checker in the grocery store. You have circuitry connected and set up in all these places, and your bodies are used to being run off everything and everybody else. Part of your process is to dump that. A lot of you are doing that by dumping your images. Some of you are doing it by other methods and means. Whatever works for you, do it. You have to get to a place of being so at peace with you that you run your own mind, you run your own consciousness, and you tell the body what to do, not the other way around. In the meantime, the skin and the nervous systems take an enormous brunt from the evolutionary changes. The light of your being goes through the nervous system. All these little nerves clear up to the spinal column is where the light entity that you are lives. The light that you are can refract, be diffused, or directed, but it doesn't bend. Have you ever questioned, how do I take light and make it a body? How do I take light and make it be a body? You designed almost a fiber optic system called nerves and nervous system to get the light of your being to take shape. to take to make arms, legs, and etc. Therefore, when you're raising your light, your vibration, the whole entire nervous system is going to take the brunt of it. If you have some blockages in it, a lot of you will end up with lower back pain. You can get pain shooting into your legs, arms, and also numbness sometimes. Everybody can be different with it. If you have a predisposition genetically to back problems, or if you've had an injury in the lower back, your solar plex or sacral area, they might start acting up. You're going to run more light through there than you're used to, and you're going to have some pain. Also, with this, sometimes the body will go into involuntary shudders, shakes, and convulsions. As the light of your being moves through the body, it electrically triggers the nerves, so they will seem involuntary. Not all of you will have all these symptoms. I'm just telling you some of the different symptoms. Again, if you ever have any problems, do go to a doctor, because then the doctor will tell if there is anything wrong or not, and then you can release some of your fears. As the nervous system and the spinal column start taking more of a brunt, if you have scar tissue, if you have any kind of blockage in there, it is going to be more aggravated, more painful, and you're going to have a few little difficulties. Your skin is a receptor for the light. When the light comes in and out, it has a tendency to burn it. Sometimes, when you're dumping genetic information, you can dump so many toxins that your skin can rash. With some people, it will go to a point of almost lesions from the dumping. Not all of you have to worry about getting lesions, but that is something that can occur. You can have all kinds of skin difficulties, problems, and ailments with the evolutionary process. If you could look at it, the genetic shift and change that you're going through is almost like trying to take a cat and turn it into a rhinoceros. If you were a scientist and doing this in the lab, you'd be very gentle about it, because you'd know that it would take quite a bit of doing to get that cat genetically, skeletal wise, and everything else to end up being the rhinoceros. When it is happening to your own bodies, you're not very gentle with yourselves, and you get very critical with it. The bodies will also go through fatigue. The fatigue comes from several things. It comes partly from the evolution that is going on with these bodies, but it also comes from jumping dimensional realities. The body can go through periods of fatigue like anything else, unlike anything it has had. It doesn't have to have them, and it can have them for periods here and there where a physical it doesn't have to have them, and it can have them for periods here and there where any physical activity is an effort. Talking is almost an effort. To do anything is almost an effort. The body fatigue level is such that it just can't function. And some of you will get to a point where it just says, I can't and I won't. If you're down on yourselves and critical, you're going to have more difficulty with it. Would you talk a little about the immune system and what happens to it during this evolutionary process? During the evolutionary process, the immune system will go through a period of shutdown, but it does not have to be long term. Most of you will go through periods with it. You're trying to reprogram it and restructure it to the new body, the new you. You're generating all this love, all these intensities, all this beauty of who and what you are, even down to the point of, I'm God and I want to live as a God in this body. You're putting all these intensities in and trying to force it into the DNA. If you're putting foreign things in your DNA, the body is going to attack it. The DNA is so protected that the body immediately sends out antibodies to kill anything foreign. You're putting all your beautiful, loving, new, positive attitudes right next to your DNA to go into your DNA. Because the body sees those attitudes as something foreign to it, it tries to kill them. You're not getting anywhere with that. So instead, what you're doing is taking all these attitudes, all the new you, and you're kind of putting it in repositories. Rather than completely trying to insert it into your DNA or into your neural memory, you're storing it. You're storing it in these repositories to go online when you're ready for it. Otherwise, when you start the creation of the life hormone through all your new attitudes, the body's natural resistance comes up and kills it because it is foreign to it. So you're learning how to hold them in little repositories. This is why a lot of you have said, I've changed my attitude and I feel really good. And then you have a bad day and you say, why doesn't this work? Why doesn't anything work? It is because it has not gone online yet. It is not part of your physical structure yet. So, therefore, it's going to have to be a conscious effort to make it work. Your DNA strand looks like a twisted ladder with little nodules on it. In order to get out of the physical attitude, you have to grow 3 new rungs on your ladder. These are the self-worth rungs. You were not given them in the body at birth or ever. The reason is that you have these. The reason is that if you have those and you're not clear, you could destroy yourself, the planet, or anything else. This is your power. The God in a body is the last 3 rungs, and some of you will go on to grow a 4th and 5th. But you have to have these last 3 rungs to gain your entire God power in this body. You can't do it until you're worth something, which means you have to love yourself in order to grow them. These last 3 rungs are made up of these little nodules. You are setting these little nodules of thought there in the pocket around your DNA. I love myself. I'm all right. I'm okay. Here is some joy. But you're not using the hydrogen bonding to hook them into your DNA to imprint your cellular structure. If you did, the body's natural resistances would say, here's an alien, kill it. So you hold them until you get enough to pretty much build a new rung on your ladder. Then the whole entire immune system of the body has to shut down to rescript the DNA. That is the only way the DNA can be rescripted. It will have to stay shut down a minimum of 28 days to imprint this new material. Your immune system will try to get you to a point where it knows that you're not going to get any contagions, where you know that you can help, where you know that you can have some help, and you're going to be all right for a period of time. The simple cells in your body, the ones that have to be able to carry this DNA, take 28 days to produce. The immune system shuts down so it won't kill the new material. When it is shut down, your body runs off the adrenal system, and your adrenal system kicks in harder than it ever did before. Some of you have had almost this real stressed edge, and you don't know where it is coming from, but it almost feels on one side just a total fatigue of the body, almost where it wants to die. This process creates an edge, a very sharp edge, and most of you will recognize it. The immune system will try to stay down for 6 weeks if it can, because that ensures more of the DNA will be rescripted into the genetic memory. When it shuts down, you need to be gentle with your bodies. Love them. Do not get ornery with them. Just know that they are going through something right now, and they're going to come back out of it. A lot of you don't let them stay shut down. A lot of you don't let them stay down long enough to let the whole DNA rescript. And so you'll go through a series of these. Some of you will usually go through a major process or major illness at some point when it is rescripting. Most of you won't do it on an ongoing basis. Most of you have already done it at least once in your life. You'll do it once, and it might be a period of months or years before you'll do it again. Something similar happens in your brain with your neurons. Most of you are evolving masters, but you are still going to get into some anger. Many of you have already gotten past that point. Anger is the most misunderstood thing you have. Anger is the emotional story you put on something that isn't anger at all. It is creation. The neurons in your brain look much like a tree with branches. That is the easiest way for your mind to look at them. In order for your brain to continually and habitually maintain your new progress and your new evolution and growth, it has to go online. Whenever the neuron fires, it fires from the core and goes out through the branches. This connects thoughts, one thought to another, and this determines your behavior. Whatever is closest to the core or the center of the tree is going to have the biggest brunt of everything pushed through it. Your brain is trying to learn new thinking processes. You can't attach them to the center of the tree or the middle of the neuron because the brain and thought process already run through the core. You're going to have to put the new attitudes and thinking in as a very fine sliver of neuron, just like a tiny fine branch on the outside edges of the tree. All of your new thoughts go out on the edges, just like new growth on trees do. All of you are going to require some event in your life to put those online so that they are permanently yours. Most of you will use intensities through the brain called rage to do so. There are other ways of doing it, so if you don't get into rage, it doesn't mean that your brain isn't going online. You can be a very gentle, loving, beauteous person and free of all the angers and rages. But when you have enough of these tiny fibers to go online, the vibration or the intensity, which you call anger or rage, runs up the spine through the nervous system, shoves into the brain through the hypothalamus, and turns all these neurons on. Anger is when you repress it, shove it down, and don't allow it to have its course. Then it sits like a pressure cooker. What you call rage is a negative in your minds. If you called it Kundalini, you would believe it to be a beautiful experience, but it is the same energy. It is the exact same life force. It shows up, it flows up the spine, hits the hypothalamus, and reprograms it. As it does that, if you have an issue with your own creative life forces, you repress it. In that repression, it boils up again, and you call that anger and label it rage. When this first starts coming up and rising very fast, it will scare your body. You might still call it rage and anger, because when it rises that fast, your body says, oh, this is scary. Since this is scary, it must be anger. The body puts all these emotional stories called anger around it instead of calling it love. The body will spontaneously start shoving that up the spinal cord. When it does, it takes all of life. When it does, it takes all the life that it built at the base of your spine and with a velocity force it up through the brain to the hypothalamus to reprogram the pituitary into the neurons and puts all your new thought processes online. Without that, all they are good ideas, and they never become part of your reality. Many of you need to be gentle with your system because it might be one that was programmed by your ancestors and your predecessors for rage rather than for the love, or what one would call the Kundalini. You have to be in a place of being willing to let go of your judgments about what is happening. As soon as you can quit labeling it and calling it bad, you'll change it and quit repressing it. Then you'll start feeling it for the love that it is as it starts rising. But for a lot of you, your systems are so afraid of expression that it holds it down. When it finally comes out, all of a sudden you went weeks, months, and years without lifting your voice, and now you're screaming at the top of your lungs at somebody. It is your own system opening up to let this go online. You have to learn to be gentle with yourselves. If you can be gentle, then you can patch up and repair the damage after you scream. What about the flip side of anger? Laughter is the best thing you can do. It is the prescription for anything. Laughter is your being. Laughter in your being actually activates your diaphragms, messes with your solar plex, pulls the energy up, and it is the absolute best thing any of you can do. I would say laugh as much as you can. Just as many of you repress your anger, you repress your laughter also. If you notice when you're laughing, you hold your chest very tight. If you can let it happen, if you can let it open and let that laughter out, it will move the diaphragm and the rib cage, which moves the back, stimulates your spinal column, and lets the light move up into your brain faster. So I would say laugh. Laugh your heads off. Laugh your way back home. Laugh your way into health. It is the best thing any of you can do in these bodies. These bodies were created for fun, joy, and to live life to its fullest. Anything that enhances that, do it. There are two things that you will all learn about gods. One, they all know how to have fun. And two, they are lazy. They don't expend any energy when they don't need to. Wow. From the mush into the butterfly. I'm away to feed my soul with yoga. Namaste. Indeed. Same to you. Thank you. Namago. I love it. It takes 28 days to build a new habit. Robin Sharma says it takes 66, in fact, and others also. He just quotes it, and I referenced his work. But it is, the jury is out as to how long it takes yet. But what I do know, without a doubt, is that if we stop being terrorized, which let me just read you, what is terrorism? The very word terrorism is charged with emotion and politically loaded. Perhaps it is for this reason that the world communities have failed to come up with a universally accepted definition of the term. Most governments do agree that certain key elements define an act as terrorism. These elements include an act of violence, targeting non combatant targets, designed to spread fear, and one that is politically motivated. The FBI defines terrorism according to U.S. law, specifically 18 U.S.C. Section 2331, which defines terrorism, both domestic and international, as any activity that is violent or dangerous to human life, which violates federal or state law, and appears to be intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, influence the policy of a government by intimidation or coercion, or affect the conduct of a government by mass destruction, assassination, or kidnapping. An additional element of international terrorism is that it is committed outside the territorial jurisdiction of the government. An additional element of international terrorism is that it is committed outside the territorial jurisdiction of the U.S. or transcend national boundaries in terms of the means by which they are accomplished, the persons they appear intended to intimidate or coerce, or the locale in which their perpetrators operate or seek asylum. Wow. So, terrorism. Seems we're in it. I hope that you are having a fantastic morning. It is 11:33 where I am right now, which means that I hope that you will have a day as magical as what the time said it could be for you. So I'm gonna go up and get my grandpa some oatmeal, since I heard he got up while we've been here with together live. And I appreciate your tuning in and for participating in the comments and for daring to be your authentic self fully. So I hope this was useful, and I hope you will see how being a bond servant is essentially an altruistic one who does not take money for doing their life's mission specifically, but that does the mission because it is required. And then a slave who is under someone else's jurisdiction and watch simply because they got sold out and didn't understand how to correct that. So I look forward to coming together again very soon. January 10th, it's Monday. It's at 8 p.m. is going to be the next meeting of Minds, Hearts, Souls, and Spirits. So please do come and join on Monday at 8 o'clock, and you can get the details to be able to actually be in the view with me over on meetup.com under Peaceful Inner Warriors United. Have a great day. Laura J. Namaste. Namaga.